devastated by the scale of the ongoing massacre.
The Walking Dead, they're for real.
In one battle alone, the banks of the River Somme devour more than 1 million corpses.
Where are you ugly bastards coming from?
Riddled with bullets, poisoned by gas, dismembered by shrapnel, and torn down in ruthless hand-to-hand combat.
Taste justice.
Mental World War I FPS action. Yeah, that sounds about right. This is the third World War I FPS ever made, and there's only about 8 of those in total. Codename Eagle was the first one set in an alternate history. Darkest of Days was in a few settings, so I'm not sure if it counts. It's a question for another day. There are some good reasons why this setting isn't that popular for the genre. The public generally views the war as a senseless tragedy and not something you can make video game villains out of easily. People argue over whose fault it was to this day. More importantly than that, these guns are really slow. It's harder to make the combat exciting this way. You could make the combat slower with more consequence to compensate for that, but Necrovision didn't do that at all. This is different.
Vaya con Dios, amigo.
Consider yourself purified.
Oh, not that part yet. I'll take it from the top, starting with the graphics. I like the loading screen, but it's clear there's something wrong with the shadows. This might be hard to see on YouTube, but it looks like bugs are crawling all over this man. That would be realistic, but this is on everything. There was something wrong with the lighting. There are some versions of Necrovision where you need to force DX10 in it, but no, GOG has it already. You would need to go out of your way to make it go on DX9, which didn't solve it. I'll spare the details. It was a lot of, I tried this, but it didn't work. And I tried a lot. Most of it just caused other problems. So I had to give some ground. I had to turn the ambient occlusion off. This makes the lighting look worse, but the screen isn't crawling with grain anymore. War is all about sacrifices, after all. During explosions or impacts, the screen can go kind of crazy. It's like this with or without VSync. It can get really bad. Recording didn't pick this up, but sometimes when I used fully automatic weapons, the frame rate would crawl. So I turned it off. It didn't fix the screen issues, but it stopped the slowdown. While not directly impacting the game, I thought this was interesting. BJ's not really in the corner. I put him there in post. Why? The recording overlay, which so far has been invisible in every game I've used it in, shows up. But only when firing certain weapons, so it's on and off all the time. So BJ will be up there blocking all of that out. His spirit is here with us. I'm not going to spoil Quake 4, but this game is similar in that there's a bit of a turning point near the middle. It feels like covering 2 separate games in a video where I'm already covering 2 separate games. I'm going to start with the first part, which is the Battle of the Somme. Or, as it was called at the time, the Great Fuck Up. No, that's not a joke. Necrovision does a great job at setting it up.
Like the rats they love to eat. Remember this hour. Tonight the forces of evil will be crushed once and for all. This is the call of duty.
What a load of horseshit.
Genius. I think this is supposed to be Field Marshal Haig. He was in charge of it after all. On the first day of the Somme, Haig had been shelling the lines for a few days at this point. He assumed the German trenches would be like his and there should be nothing left by the time he was done. This was the fatal mistake. As we all know now, if Germans have to be somewhere longer than 3 hours and they're not drinking, they start building fortifications out of concrete, some going about 10 meters into the ground. So when Haig ordered his men over the top, shoulder to shoulder, he thought there'd be no resistance, and there was. They had just been having a good time playing some steam pipe assembly board games, so when they saw the parade coming towards them, they made it go away. The British took nearly 60,000 casualties in a day. I think great fuck up is an understatement. In Necrovision, some things are off, like the date is far too late and there's a dragon, so this isn't the 2009 version of Verdun or anything. You play as a soldier just trying to survive the war. It soon becomes clear that something strange is going on in the battlefront.
I think I've been buried alive.
An American corpse? Eh?
How long have I been out?
Do I look like a bloody cuckoo clock?
Yeah, you play as an American southerner named Simon. That seems slightly out of place. While they tried to make the opening cinematic, it's so incoherent that you can't really appreciate it. This game came out in 2009, so they were trying to compete with the likes of Call of Duty. It's not incoherent just because of what you're seeing, but also the order the story is told in. First you're fighting in the trenches and then the intro cutscene plays. To their credit, you can see production values all over it. The look of it really reminded me of the Death Stranding trailers. Then it starts playing really choppy gameplay, and then back to Death Stranding, and then more choppy gameplay. The sequence seems like something you'd see in an E3 trailer instead of the beginning of the game. Apparently Simon's gonna fight demons and do it with a big glove. Got it. Then right after it just puts you back into World War I. I looked it up later and yeah, it was an E3 trailer, they just put it in the beginning of the game. It completely throws a wrench into your expectations for reasons that I'll return to later. For now, it's only slightly confusing. After the prologue, I had low expectations, but things started to pick up. The first thing the game teaches you is how to kick an enemy. For me, that's a really good sign. You can make combos from different melee attacks, your kick, and your weapons. This is when the game finally takes your training wheels off. And when it does, there's a lot of fun to be had.
Close your eyes and pray. Sleep well.
This is still a very, very flawed game. Let's start with the presentation. For 2009 standards, the character models and texture work range from subpar to average. This is by no means something I'd call a pretty game. This is one of those late 2000s Brown and Bloom titles. For the most part, everything is brown, gray, muted, and washed out, except for sometimes when they crank up the brightness and lights to remind you you're still alive. But to be fair, it is fitting for the setting. I wouldn't expect World War I to look like a Power Rangers Pride Parade sponsored by Fruity Pebbles. There are a few times in the first half and they'll make the colors more interesting, and the night fights look really good. This is where the bright lighting works with the dark backgrounds. Considering its premise, I wish the first half was less generic. While there are moments that remind you it's World War I, from time to time you can kind of forget and feel like you're playing a World War II game. And there were plenty of those around. Even when reality starts warping, it still feels a little bit too safe. Even when they're being fairly generic, there's a lack of consistency across the design themes. Like this mech was made by the same people who made that giant robot Scorpion. Then it starts deploying these organic-looking Eyebot probes, but the people who made them are wearing steampunk dwarven armor. You might think that this seems odd to complain about. Variety is good in a game, the problem is, it takes itself very seriously. In the first chapter of the game, I started to wonder if it was some kind of parody game, kind of like Spec Ops The Line but sillier. I was legitimately starting to wonder if it was trying to tell me something about the relation between violence in games and story in games. You know how most games by now had audio logs or stuff you could read in a menu? Not Necrovision. You find letters that will fill the entire screen, don't save anywhere, and if you stop reading it you lose a letter and have to go back to look at it. The game doesn't pause. Try reading All Quiet on the Western Front next to Duke Nukem. If your character speaks, the narration gets cut off.
You're under my feet. His leg above me, high on the side of the trench. I got something special for you. Get the point.
The sound design is okay and the music forgettable. The voice acting, however, is unforgettable.
Yes, there he is. Looks like he's crawling. Almost there. Boys, we have a problem here.
That is what we want. Strong. Yes, he could lead them. He could change it all.
It's not necessarily horrible, it's just odd.
Was something nastier after you?
Yes, verdammt!
Some of the best voice acting is from Simon. He has random one-liners and a dedicated button for them.
Consider your sins forgiven. Well, that's got him. Well cooked. And easy on the onions. Get the point. Take that, freak! Would you care to dance? No? Yes? I guess not. Ah, pain!
If you only knew what this war has unleashed.
I don't know, huh? Well, just try me. How about dragons? Giant monsters, resurrected corpses? You want me to go on?
What's odd is sometimes he'll switch voice actors. His voice does start to change halfway through, but this is a completely different third voice.
Rise and fight! Lord, have mercy.
Who is that? So now for the levels in combat. Necrovision was made by the Farm 51, which had a lot of people who worked on Painkiller.
Here, take a little painkiller.
The game physically looks similar to Painkiller. It uses a slightly updated version of the engine. Make no mistake, this isn't a Painkiller clone as it has a lot more emphasis on melee combat. A lot of your weapons are slow to reload and many enemy types will run up into your face to fight you. You can hold as many weapons as you can find and you can really play around with it. You can choose between holding a pistol and an explosive, 2 pistols, a pistol and a melee